Welcome to a deep dive into something that sounds incredible, a universal language system, or ULS for short.
Okay.
You've sent over a bunch of sources about this system that claims it can actually break down language barriers. We've got a research paper, a model with case studies, and even some study guides to dig through. So how exactly does this ULS work, and what could it mean for things like language learning and AI?
Well, the universal language system takes a really interesting approach to understanding the core meaning of language. It uses something called a hierarchical node-based
An
system.
hierarchical node-based system. Okay, I'm intrigued. But you're gonna have to break that down for me.
Think of it like a detailed filing system for language. Instead of folders, we have nodes.
Okay.
There are 5 main nodes: focus, spatial, action, identity, and quantitative. Each of these main nodes
Mhm.
then has more specific subnodes branching off from it.
So instead of organizing files,
Yeah.
we're organizing meaning.
Yeah.
But how do words and sentences fit into this node system?
That's where things get really fascinating. Instead of simply looking at a word's grammatical function, the system breaks down sentences word by word and assigns each word to a node based on its core definition.
So it's more about understanding what a word truly means rather than just how it's used in a sentence. That seems like a pretty big shift from traditional language analysis.
Exactly. And this shift allows the system to get to the core meaning of a sentence, regardless of the language it's in. It's like creating a universal blueprint for understanding.
Yeah.
These assigned nodes are stacked in a specific order to represent the deeper meaning of the entire sentence.
So it's kind of like a universal decoder ring for language.
Yeah.
Can you give me a concrete example of how this node stacking actually works?
Absolutely. Let's take a simple sentence like, the weather looks nice today.
Perfect.
It-
We've all thought that at some point, right?
Right. So the word the would fall under the focus node. Weather would be classified as focus subjective, immaterial, factual. Looks would be action current occurring. Nice is focus subjective, abstract, positive, and today is spatial time current.
Okay, so each word gets its own specific node based on its meaning. I'm starting to see how this creates a kind of map of the sentence, but how do we actually read this map? What does the string of nodes tell us about the meaning of the sentence?
By stacking these nodes in order, you get a sequence that represents the deeper meaning of the sentence. Focus. Focus subjective, immaterial. Factual. Action current occurring. Focus subjective, abstract, positive. Spatial time current. This tells us that there's a focus on the weather. It's being described positively, and the action of looking nice is happening right now.
That's pretty amazing. We can see the whole essence of the sentence laid out in this node stack. But you mentioned earlier that there's another layer to this system, something called a context matrix.
Yes, the context matrix is where things get even more interesting.
Mm.
This matrix defines how the presence of one node influences the interpretation of others.
So it's not enough to just understand the meaning of individual words and their corresponding nodes. We also need to understand how those nodes interact with each other.
Exactly. The context matrix acts as a guide for understanding how these different concepts relate within a sentence. For example, let's say we have the nodes for cat and sat. The context matrix helps us determine if the cat is actively sitting or if something else is sitting on the cat.
Okay, now that makes sense. So the context matrix helps to resolve those kinds of ambiguities that often come up in language.
Precisely. It's like having a set of rules that help us understand how the meanings of words can shift depending on the other words around them. And because this matrix maps the relationships between all the main and subnodes, it's a pretty complex system.
How complex are we talking? Is this like a spreadsheet with a few formulas or something much bigger?
It's much bigger. The complete context matrix is a 49 by 49 grid, mapping all the potential interactions between the main and subnodes.
Wow, that's a massive grid. It really highlights just how much goes into understanding the nuances of language.
You're absolutely right. And one of the most exciting things about this system is how it could be applied to artificial intelligence.
Okay, now we're getting into territory I'm really excited about. AI that can actually understand the subtleties of language. Tell me more. How could the ULS change the game for AI development?
This system has the potential to make AI models much more efficient and accurate when it comes to understanding and generating human language. Imagine AI that can learn languages faster, translate more effectively, and even help preserve endangered languages by capturing their unique structure and meaning.
So we're not just talking about AI that can process language as data, but AI that can actually grasp the meaning behind the words. That sounds almost too good to be true. How is this kind of efficiency even possible?
Well, the ULS claims to only require 1% of the data. that's typically needed to train traditional AI language models.
Wait, 1%? That's a tiny fraction of the data. How can it possibly learn effectively with so little information?
Because it's not focused on learning every possible grammatical variation of a word or phrase. Instead, it's focused on understanding the core meaning, as represented by the node stack, which remains consistent across languages.
That's a really clever approach. By focusing on the core meaning, the system can cut through a lot of the noise and complexity that traditional language models get bogged down in. But how do we know if this actually works?
That's where the case studies come in. They're not just interesting examples, they're actually demonstrations of how powerful this system can be.
All right, let's dive into those case studies. You mentioned one involving poetry generation. What exactly happened there? Did they just feed a bunch of poems into an AI and hope for the best?
It was a bit more strategic than that. The researchers used the ULS to train an AI on poems by Walt Whitman and Edgar Allan Poe. By analyzing the node stacks of these poems, the AI learned to create new poems that captured the unique style and cadence of each poet.
So the AI wasn't just copying words or phrases. It was learning the underlying structure of meaning that makes those poets so distinct.
Exactly. And what's even more remarkable is that the researchers could change the emotional tone and imagery of the poems simply by tweaking a few nodes without altering the core structure.
So they could take a poem about, say, the beauty of nature and transform it into a poem about the despair of loss, while still maintaining the essence of Whitman or Poe's style. That's pretty incredible. It's like having a creative toolbox that lets you explore endless variations while staying true to the original spirit of the work.
That's a great way to put it. Another case study you sent over involved Martin Luther King Jr.'s iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. The AI successfully transformed the speech to focus on a completely different topic, cantaloupes and steak, while preserving the original rhythm and emotional impact.
And that one really caught my eye. It's hard to imagine those two subjects going together, but I can see how it would be a powerful demonstration of the system's ability to adapt powerful rhetoric to completely different contexts. What other transformations did they try?
They also tackled a classic literary challenge, transforming Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven into a poem about cake. They even gave it a new title, The Cake.
From ravens to cake. That's quite a leap. I'm really curious about the process. How did the AI manage to make such a drastic shift while still maintaining coherence? Did they just replace every mention of a raven with cake?
It's a bit more nuanced than that. The system first analyzed the raven to determine the node stack for each sentence. Then, it replaced key nouns and adjectives with cake-related words, while keeping the original node assignments. This allowed the AI to maintain the grammatical structure and overall flow of Poe's poem, while shifting the content to something completely different.
So instead of just swapping out words, the system is preserving the deeper structure of meaning encoded in those node stacks. It's like taking a blueprint and building something completely new, while staying true to the original architectural design.
That's a great analogy. The researchers also conducted a fascinating cross-lingual experiment. They compared the node stack for the first line of the Raven across various languages: English, French, Spanish, German, even ancient languages like Latin and ancient Greek.
So they were testing whether this system could really uncover a universal structure of meaning that transcends individual languages. That's a pretty bold claim. What did they find?
The findings were remarkable. The node stack for that first line was consistent across all the languages they tested. They even included invented languages like Klingon, and the results were still consistent.
That's pretty mind-blowing. It really suggests that there's a deeper level of meaning embedded in language that we're only beginning to understand. And this ULS seems to be giving us a powerful tool to access that deeper level. Now, what about that Sumerian text you mentioned earlier? That one really piqued my curiosity.
This case study involved analyzing a fragment of an incomplete Sumerian text. The challenge was to extract meaning from a text where significant portions were missing, like trying to solve an ancient puzzle with missing pieces.
So how did the ULS handle that? Did it try to fill in the blanks or just work with what it had?
It worked with what it had, and the results were fascinating. The system was able to identify the key elements of the story. It determined that the text involved a child who was tasked with building a house on a specific day in the future.
That's incredible. It's like the system was able to extract the core narrative thread even though pieces of the story were missing.
Exactly, and the analysis went even deeper, suggesting that the text might be connected to themes of religion and mythology. One interpretation even suggested it could be about a child bringing heaven to earth.
That's really thought-provoking. It shows how the system could be used to not just translate ancient texts, but to uncover deeper layers of meaning and potential cultural significance that might otherwise remain hidden.
You're exactly right. And we haven't even talked about the Who's on First routine yet.
Ah, yes, that's the one that really made me laugh. Tell me. How do you translate a comedy routine that relies so heavily on wordplay into completely different languages, especially fictional ones?
The researchers used the ULS to translate the classic Who's on First routine into Klingon and Dothraki. The goal was to see if the system could preserve the comedic timing and wordplay, even when dealing with such drastically different linguistic structures.
I'm dying to know how that turned out. Was it actually funny in Klingon and Dothraki?
According to the researchers, the translated routines retain the essence of the original comedy. The wordplay and misunderstandings that make the routine so funny translated surprisingly well, highlighting the ULS's ability to adapt to humor across linguistic boundaries.
That's pretty amazing. It really speaks to the system's flexibility and ability to handle not just literal meaning, but also the more subtle aspects of language, like humor. So after exploring all these fascinating case studies, what are the big takeaways? What does this all mean for the future of language and communication?
I think the implications are profound. This ULS has the potential to revolutionize how we interact with language and with each other. Imagine a world where language barriers are no longer an obstacle to communication, where AI can truly understand our needs and intentions, and where the incredible diversity of human language can be preserved for generations to come.
It's a really compelling vision, a future where language is no longer a barrier, but a bridge connecting people and cultures.
It really makes you rethink our relationship with language itself.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as this collection of separate, often confusing systems, the ULS suggests that there's this underlying structure of meaning that we all share.
It's like we've been so focused on the differences between languages that we've overlooked this fundamental level of shared understanding.
That's a great point. The ULS provides a framework for seeing language not as a series of isolated islands, but as an interconnected network of meaning.
So if we can tap into that network, we could potentially understand each other on a much deeper level, regardless of what language we speak. What implications do you see for fields like education or diplomacy?
The possibilities are really exciting. Imagine a world where students can learn new languages, not by memorizing grammar rules, but by understanding the underlying structure of meaning. Or imagine diplomats who can negotiate complex agreements with a nuanced understanding of each other's perspectives, even if they're speaking different languages.
It sounds almost utopian, but you're right. The potential for positive change is huge. And what about AI? We talked earlier about the efficiency gains. But how could this system change the way we interact with AI on a more fundamental level?
If AI can be trained to understand language through this ULS framework, it opens up a whole new level of interaction. We can move beyond giving AI simple commands or asking basic questions. We could actually have conversations with AI, exchange ideas, and collaborate on creative projects.
That's a pretty profound shift. It wouldn't just be about using AI as a tool. It would be about AI becoming a true partner in communication and creativity.
Exactly. And that brings up an important point. As we develop AI that's more capable of understanding and responding to human language, we also need to be thinking about the responsible and ethical development of this technology.
I think that's key. Any technology this powerful has the potential for misuse. How do we ensure that the ULS is used for good, for promoting understanding and connection, rather than division or manipulation?
It's a question we need to be grappling with right now. We need to be having open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits of this technology and develop guidelines and safeguards to ensure that it's used ethically and responsibly.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the potential of the ULS. It's clear that this system could change the world in so many ways, from how we learn languages, to how we interact with AI, to how we understand each other across cultures.
It's been a fascinating exploration. We've uncovered the basic principles of this node-based system, seen how it's being used to transform text and translate languages in remarkable ways, and even glimpsed the potential it holds for the future of human communication.
You're right. This deep dive has been packed with mind-blowing insights. We've seen how the ULS allows AI to write poetry like famous poets, transform iconic speeches while preserving their impact, and even decode ancient texts with missing pieces.
And we've also considered the broader implications of this technology, both the exciting possibilities and the potential challenges we need to address.
It's clear that the ULS is more than just a language tool. It's a new lens through which we can view the very nature of language and meaning.
And on that note, I'd like to leave you with this thought. If we can truly unlock this universal language of meaning, what new forms of communication and understanding might emerge? It's a question worth pondering as we step into this new era of linguistic possibility.
That's a great question to leave our listener with, something to think about as they continue to explore the fascinating world of language and technology. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time for another journey into the world of knowledge.